1. Let me start off by saying I have experienced many strange and unexplainable things in my life so far. I live in an extremely rural area of the US, and I used to be able to walk out my back door and walk for miles through the woods before ever stumbling across a house, or any building for that matter. I've heard every bird noise, deer noise, unexplainable noises. You get the picture. We moved into a new, to us house in 2020 that was built in the mid-70s. Within the first week, toys in the house would activate on their own. Me and my parents would feel like someone else was in the house all the time, knowing that no one else is there. Sometime in October of 2020, a motion-activated candy bowl started going off in the kitchen. My then significant other claimed they felt someone touch their hand when they reached into the guest bedroom to turn off the light, and heard footsteps in the attic in broad daylight. I then noticed strange noises, like whistles and voices outside by our pool, that I investigated and turned up nothing whatsoever. Not even a trace of anyone being out there. Now, to top this all off, when I was home alone one night, I was playing Xbox with some buddies doing a raid in Destiny. Through my noise-cancelling headset, I distinctively heard a whistle. This was late at night, around 2. I thought it was very coincidental. I moved on, forgot about it. A continued series of weird shit continued to happen after. Everything from footsteps in the hall, feeling of someone staring, my mother's jewelry box playing music randomly. The list goes on, but I didn't hear or see anything for months. Last week my mother, a very traditional Southern Baptist, claimed a spoon flew out of the pot on the stove into the floor. We joked and said, it must like to scare us. However, I have never been as scared as I was tonight. Me and my girl decided to take the trash out tonight. We were taking it real slow. Down the drive, trying not to wake the neighbors. As we walked, I thought I heard a noise in the neighborhood somewhere, so I stopped and told my girl to listen. We both heard, clear as day, a light whistle in the likeness of "yoo-hoo" repeated twice. My girl didn't even say anything and started to walk back to the house, so I told her to go back inside, and I pulled my gun and listened. Lo and behold, it stopped. Frankly, I'm not sure if I'm imagining a pattern that is not there, or this was a deranged lunatic trying to lure someone out of the house. I have never in my entire life been this terrified to walk outside at night, much less without a gun. Can someone offer any advice? I'm open to anything at this point. For context, any cryptid experts? I live in rural Mississippi, and the only one around here I've ever heard of is a local one called the Pigman. No, that isn't a joke, and it's a really old folktale. 2. I've been hanging around with someone on the internet who seems to attract supernatural things, or just happens to live at the very spot where supernatural stuff happens a lot. He's a pretty honest dude, and very predictable and dense too. It's fun to have him around, so skipping to the topic. One time we were having a very serious talk on Discord about how he wants to separate himself from our group in Discord since he doesn't want to be attached with the people there. Only to be left alone, like how internet friends are usually. I told him that we already value him much since we've been together for a long time with the other guys on Discord and want to make things work out for our friendship. We live far from each other, which is why he had these thoughts. He was contemplating it and shared his thoughts that he will do his best at least. But strangely, while he was speaking, I heard a child's giggle very close, as if it was also speaking through the mic. I didn't mind it at first, but the second time around, and he was still talking, I had to cut him off, and that got him confused and slightly pissed, because he was also getting emotional with his speech. I had to apologize and asked him if there was a kid nearby, and he told me that his room is small and he was sure that his doors were locked. I told him that I heard a kid's voice giggling at his mic twice, and he thought I was teasing him, but I was very serious, and that scared the both of us. The emotional atmosphere got destroyed, and we both decided to stop there to calm ourselves and forget about the incident. But we didn't end the call. We still wanted to talk more, especially about the thing that I heard, because I knew that something was going on, and he'll tell me after things calmed down. He decided to rest for a bit since he's having a night shift, and I did some errands for my parents. Half an hour passed, I came back and the call didn't disconnect. I put on my headphones and decided to scroll through some feeds and chats on Twitter since I didn't want to wake the guy up. While scrolling, I heard a soft whisper on the mic. It was a woman's voice this time, and it was just calling my friend's actual name. My friend has two names since he's half Japanese, half Malaysian, and we'd usually use his Japanese name if we want to call him, but we never tried calling him using his Muslim name, since Malaysia is a Muslim country, since we thought that we were not close enough yet to call his Muslim name. We first thought it was either his sister or his mother, so I wasn't really bothered by it. The woman called his name twice, and I just remained silent on the other end of the call. I thought she was trying to wake him up for dinner, but didn't respond. What's weird is that I didn't hear the door open, and was completely silent when the woman came in. His mic was sensitive enough to catch any small noise in his room, and the whisper was awfully loud, which means it's close to the mic. A few minutes have passed by since the whisper, and I decided to call him by his Discord name because I'm used to calling him that. I heard shuffling in the background, which means he had his headset on and woke up. I told him that someone was trying to wake him up in a soft voice, and assumed it was either his mom or his sister. He once again told me that his room is always locked, and if anyone wants to wake him up, they have to knock on the door aggressively. Of course, I already somehow suspected that it was the same thing that happened earlier that day. He soon told me about why things like that happen a lot, because according to the shaman that came to visit their home from Indonesia, they said that their home is a portal to the other world, and it gives off a very high energy because of the spirits, or what they call jinn. It made sense to him. He said because there's a lot more intense experiences he's had when he was younger, and his whole family knows that as well. Something like this was very common for them nowadays, but that doesn't mean they'll keep adapting to it. Some of the family, including him, got a whiff of high energy, especially him, which is why things like that often happen around him. Knowing all of the experiences I have with him so far, it's very interesting and creepy, but I still think it's pretty neat hanging around with him, knowing all of these. He's still fun to be with, and I'm sure he's been keeping this side of himself from others to avoid scaring them, but I'm glad he's comfortable enough around me and a few other friends he trusts. 3. I'm really looking to get insight on the situation. Just want to hear different perspective from some people. Is this paranormal, or is there more to it? I've looked up the house history already and found nothing. I moved back to my childhood home about 3 years ago due to hardships. I'm married to my husband now and we have 3 children. Backstory. My parents' brother and myself had moved to this house when I was 3 years old, and I lived there until I moved in with my boyfriend, now husband, when I was 22. Let me say, growing up, these hauntings became pretty normal. I would always say, oh, it's just the ghost, when we heard weird things. I guess I would say it jokingly as a defense mechanism. But we heard the occasional footsteps or some voices, or I guess more like mimicking. The usual tapping or knocking, turning TV on, even had a music box turned on randomly. As a child, I would have night terrors. I would have distinct reoccurring dreams on a nightly basis, and my parents actually had a baby monitor in my room so they could listen if I was screaming or crying in my sleep. It happened numerous times where I would wake up to them trying to wake me up, but I have no memory of this screaming or anything. These instances happened for years until they just stopped. I was probably around 8 or 10 when it stopped. Flash forward to high school, and they start up again. Not the night terrors, but I would hear footsteps when no one else was home. One day I was taking a shower and I heard my mom announce she was home, but in actuality she didn't come home for another hour, when she actually announced she was home. Like everything else, I brushed it off. I moved to my brother's room around this time since it was a larger room and he was living in another town. Since the first night in this room, there was always footsteps in the ceiling between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. It became so normal I slept with the TV on to drown out the footsteps so I could sleep. So flash forward to now, my kids ages 9, 3, and 1. About a year and a half ago, before my last baby was born, We had a couple of things happen to my now middle child. We had her bed next to ours, and she had her tablet before bed to wind down. One week she started looking up at the ceiling and talking to it. At first we didn't think much of it. The next day she started laughing at the ceiling. I thought it was weird, but brushed it off. On the third day she was showing the ceiling her tablet and laughing. I thought whatever it is, it's not scaring her, so maybe it's a good spirit. Day 4 comes around and she's showing the ceiling her tablet again and not laughing. And out of nowhere she starts crying. She was 2 and really couldn't communicate what was wrong. I wake up my husband immediately and he said a whole prayer for her. And she was good after that. Nothing really happened after that until just recently. Let me say I hear things a lot, so I usually look for others' reactions before I act on something. About 3 weeks ago, my middle child decided to sleep in her grandparents' room. It was about 11 p.m. and I heard my middle child's voice say, "Mom," and my door cracked open. So I thought she had just come to get something, but changed her mind, since the door didn't fully open. So I thought it was weird, but tried to get some sleep anyways. Turns out my husband heard her voice too and had asked what she wanted. So, since he heard her too, I was like, I'd better get up and see what she needed. As I'm walking to my kids' room, my oldest was just walking out of the restroom back to their own. And I asked if she heard her sister. She said yes. I heard her say her name and that she ran down the hallway. So the 3 of us heard her at the same time. I walk around the house looking for her with no luck. I go to my parents' room and sure enough, she is sound asleep. We all just heard her voice at the same time and thought she was up. I go back to bed with my husband and I tell him our middle child was sound asleep this whole time. He made a face, just for shits and giggles. I asked him what he heard when he heard her voice. He said he couldn't make out what was said, but he heard it by the window. So at this point I inform him that we all heard the same voice, but we all heard different things. I then tell him how I was a little freaked out and I was bringing back memories from when I was a kid, like these stories I mentioned. The look on his face at this point was shocked. I guess my normal childhood in this house was a little too spooky for him. So the next day my oldest child and I bring this up to my mom. She said a super long prayer with me, and as she finished, our locked bathroom door opened by itself. We didn't notice until we went to finish feeding her tortoises, and asked if I opened the back door. We checked the door, and it was still locked, so we're assuming whatever it was left. We haven't had anything else happen since. Could it really be gone, or could it come back? Is this paranormal? Or could there be other entities? 4. In August 2021, me and my then boyfriend, he's now my ex, Aloysius, decided to move to our own place. We had 3 cats, and it made finding a home quite difficult. Finally, after weeks of searching, we found a home that would allow pets. We both had very hectic schedules, and we were in a hurry, so we only saw photos of the house. But pictures can be misleading, trust me. So we were so excited we signed the contract and would be moving in 2nd of October 2021. I was excited to see the house for the first time. When we got there with the movers, I rushed inside and had a look. It was dark and gloomy. When I went into the spare bedroom, the worst panic attack came over me out of nowhere. I ran to hide in the bathroom and tried to calm myself. I was crying and shaking. Aloysius came to look for me and try to calm me down. I said the stress of the move triggered it. So we unloaded the moving van, but I still felt uneasy. The first few days were okay, but I was starting to get very depressed very quickly. The rooms were crammed and the house overall was dark. I felt weird being in the spare room and tried to avoid it. The depression got really bad and I would cry all day and night. I nearly lost my job. My partner also started drinking more and got addicted to painkillers. He also broke his ankle in November in the house. I became suicidal, and I never felt that way before. So Aloysius's mom came to visit one day, nothing unusual, but the moment she got home, she told us we need to move. We can start looking for a new place in 2022. Now here is where I started to think there's something in this house. So just to give you an idea of the property, it was a large house, which the owners now split into two houses. We had the smaller house, and we shared a driveway with the neighbors, and the wall connecting us was on the side of our spare bedroom and on the side of their main bedroom. We became good friends with them, and they invited us over one night. I started talking with the lady, and said it was nice to get out of the house. It gives me the creeps, but I only meant it as a joke. Casually she says, "Yeah, there's a shadow connected to that wall." And she pointed to the adjoining wall. And I didn't even tell her I can't be in the spare bedroom for too long. She told me 3 people have seen the entity, and it doesn't move from its spot. This freaked me out. Fast forward to late December 2021. Me and Aloysius broke up. His drinking got out of hand. When I moved out, finally, my depression eased up. Now here is where it gets interesting. My old school friend calls me up and said she would like to do a tattoo on me before she moves to her new house. Guys, she lived right next door to our old house. And they were moving into the bigger house because our old neighbors were moving out, and they got the place. So she did the tattoo and told me they'll call me when they're settled in the new house. She did phone me, but only to tell me she hurt her arm in the new haunted place and can't tattoo anymore, and it was her only income. I don't know what is on that property, but I hated living there. My ex became a monster, our pets were depressed, I became suicidal, my ex broke his ankle, and now my friend can't ever tattoo again. 5. This was an occurrence that kindled my interest in ghosts and other supernatural entities. It was the winter of 2016, and I was excited about visiting Korg, also called Medicare, for my cousin's wedding. It's a small town located at a distance of 110 kilometers from Mysore in Karnataka, whose people mainly depend on the coffee plantations and spices for their income. The day started as we had planned with my uncle's family joining us for the trip, with the 16-year-old me hoping to have the time of my life in the next 4 days. Enough with the intro, let's dive right into the story. We reached our destination at around 10 p.m., and despite the warnings from the elderly in our family, we had requested our cousin's ancestral home, which was located in the middle of their coffee plantations, for our stay. This place had an eerie past. There were quite a few tittle-tattles about a plantation worker who had committed suicide near the house in her hut due to her partner's infidelity, leaving her newborn baby. During her death ceremony, the people present in the house were rattled by the screams of her baby, and when they rushed into her to check what was happening, they saw a black shadowy figure sitting and crying near the baby. The figure disappeared once they arrived, and the baby had apparently stopped its cries when the shadowy figure disappeared. My family, being firm non-believers of supernatural entities, paid no attention to their warnings and insisted on staying at that house. The house had enough space to accommodate us, and it had 3 bedrooms and a big hall. After discussions on where and how we all slept, I was asked to sleep on the couch in the hall, which I obliged, but little did I know what was about to happen later that night. The clock ticked 12, and I was still rolling from one side to the other to find a comfortable position to doze off after a tiring 10-hour journey I had that day. The couch was too cramped for my 5'10" frame, and to my surprise, my aunt, who was lying on the couch beside me, was also not asleep. This was a pleasant surprise for me, as I was already spooked by the stories I'd heard earlier about that place, and her being awake meant I need not be awake alone. We started speaking on general stuff, and in no time the clock chimed as the time was 12:30 already. It was at this point I heard the growling sound of a woman, and the sound seemed to be coming from somewhere far away. It was just constant growling with no apparent words, and just the thought of that sound gives me chills down my spine even now. At first, I thought I was just hallucinating, but looking at the pale face of my aunt, I figured out I was not the only one hearing the sound. Our chit-chat stopped, and we were keenly focusing on what the sound was and from where it was coming. The sound stopped after 10-odd minutes, and the relief was pretty clear in our faces. We smiled at each other, only to hear that sound again, but this time even closer and louder than before. We were dumbstruck, not knowing what to do, and shut our eyes in fear. The sound kept coming nearer and nearer and stopped once again, hoping that whatever was making the sound had left. I opened my eyes only to hear it again, but now right above me from the terrace of the house. The growling slowly moved from the terrace to the bedroom on my right, and then near the house door. There was a transparent glass window, covered with a screen near the door, through which I was able to see a shadowy woman-like figure. I looked at the glaring eyes of my aunt, which were now filled with tears of fright as the sound stopped once again, with both of us hoping for the emotional torture we were facing to end. There was a power failure, and the night lamp was glowing until then it stopped glowing, filling the room with darkness. In that dimness, I heard the growl right next to my head. That was the last thing I remembered when I woke up the next day, wishing it was nothing but a nightmare. I went and spoke to my aunt, who confirmed that it was not a nightmare, but something that happened for real. No one from my family believed us when we explained what had happened the night before, except for my grandmother. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 284. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button and share the video around. Thank you very much. Alright, it's Friday, so let's not stress ourselves out too much. Let's go right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, if you had a haunted doll in your house, you knew it was haunted, there was definitely something in there, would you sell it, throw it away, or just leave it there if it wasn't really bothering you that much? I'd probably just leave it be if it wasn't doing any harm. Let me know what you think in a comment below. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.